Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for a special webinar segment organized by World Vision Lanka and facilitated by Luminary Learning Solutions. And our humble apologies this afternoon for the delayed start. We seem to have experienced a bit of a technical issue, and we've seemed to have lost one of our guests this afternoon, but hope to see him up here soon. So just to taking us back, World Vision Sri Lanka has been serving people of Sri Lanka since 1977 and in development and in relief programs. The Area Development Program, or ADP, are long-term programs spanning from anything between 12 to 15 years that primarily focuses on children and their communities. This afternoon, we will be discussing the role of parents and caregivers during a pandemic. And joining us to share their thoughts and insight, my pleasure to introduce Milani Salpitikorala. She is an attorney at law and the founder and executive director of Child Protection Force. Good afternoon, Milani. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Anton. Thank you for having me. Thank you, World Vision and Luminary, for inviting me today.
Pleasure. And we will be joined in a little while by Kanishka Rathnayake, who is the specialist, who's also the technical advisor on child protection and participation for World Vision Lanka. And I am your host, Anton Thayalan, the chief evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions, who will drive this conversation today and hope that we will be able to enjoy what's in store. Should you have any questions that you would like to ask Milani or Kanishka, or in general, please do feel free to post them in the Q&A section up there on your right-hand top corner, and we will put them across as we continue the conversation. The way we want to run this today is to have about 40-45 minutes of a good conversation and keep the question and answer bit to the end. But should you have questions up front, we will fit that into the conversation. So bringing us to the current context, we are currently dealing with a pandemic of COVID-19, which has swept across the global, leaving with it an aftermath of health concerns, as well as wealth of mental health concerns. Particularly, this is in regards to children. This situation has become, what I would say, an exceedingly stressful, and compared to adults, children are more vulnerable to the emotional impact of traumatic events that disrupt their daily lives. So in light of this, we are discussing support or supporting mechanisms and protecting children's emotional well-being as this public health crisis unfolds. So Milani, I guess, let me first pick on you, since you are my only guest at this point. Amidst the COVID-19 outbreak, we know for a fact that everyday life has changed. And by the looks of it, it will continue to change for most people, often with little notice. Now, children may struggle with significant adjustments, and as a parent, you would see this. And while these are difficult for children, we also know that to an adult mind, this might sound very trivial. But from keeping that or bearing that in mind, my question to you, I guess, would be, what are the experiences or the pressures that parents go through as a result of this kind of a pandemic or this kind of an issue, Milani?
So Anton, actually, there are quite a few points. Initially, when this started, the pandemic started and everyone was in lockdown, right? So there were many parents who were in
We've temporarily lost Milani, but I am. Oh, you're back. Sorry, we've just lost the last 30 seconds of your comments. If you could repeat, please.
Yes. Yeah, so I was saying, quite a lot of aspects of this, of the stress and the anxiety that parents were going through. So initially, it was the parents being extremely anxious about the children getting the disease, the parents getting the disease, and it was almost, I mean, the media also portrayed it in a way that, say, if a member of the family gets it, it's like you've committed a crime, the entire bomb squad is going to come to your house and take you away. And if a child actually gets it, right, they're going to take the child away from you. You're not going to be able to sit next to your child in hospital. So these kind of anxieties, which were even present in families like ours, Anton, not in, it is a global pandemic. It is something that each one of us are going through. And certain people who are finding it extremely difficult to face these anxieties. So it is all about that emotional intelligence that you need to have in your mind to be able to say, okay, I'm going to get through this, right? But not everyone can. So that was initially, and thereafter came the salary cuts and the job cuts, and this is one of the main reasons for domestic violence I see is financial situations. Also doesn't have to be in the low income families, but in normal families, where when the finances go down is when the stress increases within the family, and then of course it leads to domestic violence. So this is one area that I really wanted to talk about today, with regard to domestic violence. And
Sure.
Also during the lockdown, another problem was in one way there was, for the alcohol abusers or the substance abusers, there was no way to go and buy your alcohol or to go and buy your drugs or whatever substance. That is one. And the others, of course, stock.
Let me just hold your thought on that. And I think you've just sort of opened a very, very critical point, and I want to dive into that in a little bit. And it's important that we also cover that aspect. And I think we've just got Kanishka joined in. Kanishka, if you can hear us, can I throw that question at you? And I know from a World Vision perspective, you have seen and experienced challenges when it comes to dealing with protecting children. But from your perspective, Kanishka, what are the kind of pressures or challenges that parents have had to face as a result of this pandemic? If you can just set the tone right with that question.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Anton, for that question. And basically, okay, I believe that you all can hear me. Right. Okay. So when it comes to this pandemic, so basically, as Milani also mentioned, so this is a very new and the first-hand experience that all of the countries facing out. So basically, if I tell a direct answer to you, so the parents, the households initially, now they are facing fundamentally four aspects as issues. So for an example, physical, so there are severe changes in our physical world as well as in our social world, and also in emotional context, and at the same time in the financial aspect. So initially, while all the adults are facing into those four aspects, so basically it is not easy to cope up with the particular situations in terms of their households as well as everywhere in the society. So at the same time, now when it comes to physical changes, so wearing masks, so maybe even the television programs also, in the media also, they have changed their agenda. I mean, they have changed their programs. So initially we now, for an example, hand washing interventions, all the physical changes we can see everywhere in the environment. So the physical changes there, and also when it comes to the emotional change. So for an example, now the children are facing now for a long time, they cannot engage with the school. They are routine Sunday schools, maybe children or youth clubs, kind of severe changes in their life, so which are directly affecting on their emotional balance. On the other hand, when it comes to the social aspect, so initially with the social distance measurements, So we found that, basically we know that the people, when we are talking about personality types, so introverts and extroverts are there. So when it comes to the introverts perspective, so it is not easy to maintain sometimes the extroverts, which is not easy to maintain a social distance as introduced by the government or the health authority. So it is really challenging when it comes to the extrovert mindset. So we have to think about those things, and according to our experience, so basically now you have been seen several incidents are happening not only in Sri Lanka but also everywhere in the countries. For an example, suicidal attempts, on the other hand, domestic violence, as Milani also mentioned, and also several conflicts between different ethnic groups, maybe within the family and also among the several social groups. So behind all the incidents, we can see that the changes of physical, emotional, social, and financial aspects are there. So we have to think carefully how we can deal with those perspectives as adults as well as supporters of the children.
Right. I mean, you've actually covered quite a large area in that, and obviously from based on what we've just heard from Milani as well as from yourself, Kanishka, we can safely establish parents, as a result of the pandemic, go through a considerable amount of pressure. Now, keeping that in mind, and the fact that they do need to give attention to their children. Parents or caregivers must give special attention to children, especially during these times, because if parents go through that kind of pressure, we also know for a fact that children go through pressure, and we will cover the kind of pressure that children go through in a little bit. But can I ask you, just from a parent's perspective or a caregiver's perspective, how does a parent or a caregiver cope or deal with such stress prior to dealing with the stress of the children? Because kind of like the airline, right? We always say, put the mask on yourself first before you put it on the children. Now, I guess you have a very similar situation, Kanishka. And again, from your experience, if I can ask you to share us your thoughts, what can parents do, or what must they do to cope with such stress before dealing with the stress of the children?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, now we all know that the previous scenario has been changed. I mean, our routine, daily routine, our arrangement, for an example, earlier, basically we had this kind of conversations face to face, but now we have moved to another arena. I mean, now most of the training nowadays we are having online. So by looking at this new normal situation, so basically I would like to speak about 4 things when it comes to parenting, or how to deal with our children in terms of giving care for them. So the first thing is, as you mentioned very correctly, the first thing is as adults, as parents, we should care about ourselves before dealing with children. For an example, now, if I mention the first thing, the thing is we have to see about ourselves. What has happened to me? What about my mental situation prior to address to the children's situation? So at the same time, we have to see, we have to observe at the children as well. So what kind of changes have been happened? So what kind of behavior that with the COVID-19 situation they have practiced? So for an example, the first thing is we have to see about ourselves. At the same time, we have to observe our children. So that is the first one. The second thing is we have to be together with them. So most of the times in our context, we see that with our experience, we found that most of the times as adults, we are very much keen on advising children. So, but I would like to say that we have to be with them instead of advising. So that is the first thing. Otherwise, we never understand the children's mind, as well as we cannot go beyond we cannot eliminate this kind of pandemic situation. So the first thing is we have to see, we have to observe at ourselves as well as at children. The second thing is we have to be together with them. The third thing is we have to communicate actually the expected behavior. For an example, we have to now we see that sometimes now recently we had a wonderful survey. We have wonderful study with NCPA. So in that study, we found that 6% of children, 6% of children, so they are unaware. So very much unaware about COVID-19 situation. 6%. That means only 94% of children know what is COVID-19. So about the pandemic. So that means in Sri Lanka, in our context, still children are ignorant about the situation. So for an example, being together means, so we have to communicate, especially what the things are going on in our context, in our country, and maybe we have to focus more about the positive aspect. So as a country, we all know that we have been taken, our government, our health authority, so including our police and defense, so we have been taken very much positive intervention in terms of mitigating with COVID-19. So as parents, we have to be very careful on 4 things. First is observing. The second thing is being together with them. And the third thing is communicating. Including expected behavior. And the third thing is, fourth thing is structure for the expected behavior. That means, for an example, if I tell you very simply, so we have to develop a daily routine, but it should be consistent. At the same time, we have to be flexible. So that means, for an example, instead of maintaining a timetable, for an example, we can maintain a daily routine, but it should be very flexible but consistent. So those are the 4 basic things we can practice as parents, caregivers in terms of mitigating with COVID-19.
So, thank you. Thank you, Kanishka. So, I understand from a World Vision perspective, and this is something that you educate and create awareness amongst the communities that World Vision works with. So, to observe, to be with them, not just to advise, to be able to partner, to be able to communicate the expected behavior, and also to be able to set a routine, a structure. Now, keeping that, and I guess that helps to deal with the stress. Milani, would you like to add anything to that in terms of how parents or caregivers must deal with or cope with the stress before dealing with that of the children?
Absolutely. I completely agree with Kanishka. The routine. So this is something that is parents. Before you, like you said, deal with the child, right? If you have a set routine for the family, for yourself, it is easier. It is way much more easier to deal with a child who may be going through, something. Because one challenge, Kanishka, that I see now as a mother of 2 young children is now the online schooling, right? So this is very new to all of us, and it's been for
And I know Milani is. Have we lost Milani?
followed by a lot of schools now. Sorry, I keep going on.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah. So especially for the younger ones, this is so speaking to a few parents also, some of them who are also our clients, is the challenge that now that the parents have started working full time and the children still have to go through online classes at home, and some of them say if there are 3 children in a family, right, you have to have 3 devices because the school is at the same time online. And then there's also a lot of pressure from the schools to finish the assignments on time, to upload the assignments on time. So this, I believe, has created somewhat of an extra stress towards especially working parents to have these, going on time, and then this stress is taken out on the child. You know, to finish your work on time, and that pressure is all on the child, because now it is where the parents have to actually sit and do their work with them, because the teacher's guidance is only limited to that online class. So this is also a challenge, Kanishka, that I've seen with most of our clients, and including myself, our friends, you know, people who have children who are doing online classes now. So here again, what you said, the routine would really help. If you have a routine of, you know, and then you know these classes are going to be there, you have that set times. And of course, I don't know how it is for parents who work in other corporations. I mean, you have to go out to work and you have the devices ready for your children at home. It does create a little bit of an extra burden.
True. I mean, from the little bit that we've had, you know, the pressures definitely are up there on the list, both for children and that for parents. And I take Kanishka's 4-step method and your input into sort of parents must be able to balance it. But here is, and there is a question that's coming from the audience, and I'm not very clear, but I think I know where it's going with. And let me rephrase that, and it's a valid point. It's this. So we understand that pressures are there. We understand that not all 5 fingers are the same, and some parents may react a little different to that of another parent. At what point, Milani, does it spill over? At what point does that pressure become an abuse? Because for me, all that we've heard is that over the course of the pandemic, we've seen cases of abuse just on the rise. And it is really disheartening to hear about it. But you've been in the field and you deal with such cases. And I know Kanishka has got his experiences as well, because World Vision also has to deal with such scenarios and situations across communities. At what point does that stress and dealing with this distress of the children spill over to become an abuse? Milani, if you want to take that first, and then I will come back to Kanishka.
Yeah. So at the point of, you know, when the stress actually becomes a problem between the parents, right? It does. It almost always does. When the pressure is too high, when the parents start fighting, it becomes a situation of domestic violence. If your children are witness to domestic violence, that becomes abuse, right? And then if that domestic violence is also towards a child, if the child is being physically abused, say, for example, for not, you know, doing his homework or whatever, I don't know. But then if it becomes physical abuse up to a point where a child becomes so anxious that he doesn't want to stay at home. Past few months, we have got cases of 10-year-olds wanting to commit suicide, talking about suicide. We have 8-year-olds talking about Miss Milani, they are calling me, I have to go now. So these are thoughts of suicide, thoughts of, you know, things that are not very emotionally right for children, because my father keeps beating me up because I don't do my work. Then if I'm doing my work, he's beating me up because I'm not washing the dishes, right? And then she comes on to this thing where he says it's because he doesn't have money now because of the corona. He has lost all his income, so he's very angry all the time. Then he beats up my mother. Then my mother gets stressed about that and she beats us up. So it's all about people's emotions, and the fact that in Sri Lanka, especially, mental health and mental health assistance is not spoken of. Is not. I mean, it's not a general thing for people to say, okay, maybe you're going through something, come, let's talk about it. So this is a huge concern, and especially for children, because they are at the receiving end of adult emotional problems. And this then turns out to be, you know, I mean, they will definitely turn out to be adults with emotional issues and probably even abusers. We never know.
I mean, that's scary. Kanishka, I have a follow-up question on that. But Kanishka, your thoughts on the kind of experiences you've seen over the past 2-3 months?
Yes, actually, when you're asking about that particular question, what came to my mind is now before 18th of March, bringing a handphone by a child was a, in the school, that was a criminal offense, right? So most of the children were suspended. But after 18th of March, now if a child is not having a mobile phone, so that would be a criminal offense. So that is how Sri Lankan people sometimes, apologies, I mean, excuse me if I am telling negative things. I mean, now this is the reality. So some of things, so we are in extremes. For an example, using of mobile phone or a device. So we found that educational aspect, some of the developed countries, for an example, in Finland, in Singapore, in Japan, so most of them, so mobile phone or a technical device is very familiar thing with the children, students. So for an example, grade 2 children, grade 2 students also in Finland, so they use mobile smartphone to a certain extent. But in Sri Lanka, now what happened is, now in the 24 hours, now most of the hours the child is with the mobile phone. For an example, I personally know some of schools until 2 o'clock. Now see, starting from 8:30, then it runs at 2 o'clock only the lessons will be finishing. So then after, again the child is attending with the smartphone. For an example, now earlier the child has not received a smartphone for his or her pleasure. So, but now he receives. So in that case, now the child also in the extreme. At the same time, all the education authority also in the extreme. So that is one instance. So when we are talking about abuse, so for an example, online sexual abuse, emotional abuse. On the other hand, we know that in terms of neuropsychology. So what happens if a person exceeding his capacity in terms of using mobile device or smartphone? So all the effects now we are not considering too much, but also our prime focus has been given to the education. But so what kind of repercussions that we are going to have with particular things? So when it comes to abuse, so we have to think about the online device use, and also at the same time, so there are several experiences we have personally as organization in terms of online sexual behavior and also offline sexual behavior. Now, when it comes to lockdown situations, we know that very clearly. We know that all the family members are all together, right? So in the neighborhood, so there are several incidents. Maybe Milani also can contribute into this, but we see that online sexual offense, offline sexual offense, on the other hand, bullying incidents, so peer pressure bullying, and on the other hand, peer conflict among the children. So most of the things are happening right now. But the thing is, as a country, as a household, what kind of measurements that we are having at the moment with our hands? So that is questionable. So we have to be careful, and we have to take this dialogue, continuously for having a betterment for the children's life.
I mean, I fully agree with what you're saying, and there's definitely an insight, Kanishka. And I know Milani and I had this conversation some time back, but my question is, yes, I agree. As a country, as a nation, we do tend to take things a bit extreme to find that right balance. And I suppose that's part of your fourth point that you mentioned earlier on, a routine that kind of sets the boundaries and barriers, right? But in terms of, Milani's example of children being beaten up, etc. Now, we grew up, can I say, on my both left side and my right side has imprints of my father's palm. And I wouldn't be kidding. And I think we've all got our share of, beatings as children. Now, where does one draw the line between, yes, you do need to use a stick, I suppose. There is some level of discipline and abuse. I'm guessing there's a fine line, but where do we draw that line, Milani?
I see, and to me as a parent, I'd say, taking off my hat as a lawyer, as a parent, I don't believe in that the physical mode of discipline, right? So we have, we have a lot of ways of discipline at home. We also have, I do a lot of research on,
Sure.
young, because it does become extremely difficult sometimes with them when they're having their meltdowns, but it is important to identify what their feeling is, and the easier method to do this is from a very young age to teach them how to identify their feelings. So for example, I think you have all heard about the Think Equal program that came to Sri Lanka, right? That was highly opposed of. But this program, I have read each one of the books because one of my children were taken in as a pilot student when they started the project.
Nice. Okay.
I was to read the books beforehand because there's a consent form where parents need to sign and all that. So I said, can I have the books? I've read the books and these books are amazing. They teach children how to identify your own feelings, right? So, and then at that age, I know if I'm angry and I can tell you, Anton, I'm angry, but a child, a 3-year-old wouldn't know how to say he was angry. A 4-year-old wouldn't. So it is on how they can identify those feelings. They use colors, they use feelings, they use faces and all that. So if you teach a child to identify your feelings at a very young age, then they know how to react. Then they can, speak. So these are positive parenting tips where parents need to learn these things. So example, we have a star chart at home, right? As soon as you wake up, you finish your homework, your schoolwork, you get a gold star. Okay. So, certain things like this where you can minimize the physical disciplining at home. And also certain things like, why some children are beat up for not eating their food. But when you actually look back into it, you realize they don't sit as a family and eat their food. If the children see the parents sitting with them and finishing their plate of food, almost always you'd see the children also finishing their food on time and not messing it up. So I believe in the strength of the family unit, okay, where the parents discuss with each other. I'm sure Kanishka would agree with this as well. Parents is discussing with each other on disciplining children rather than just beating them up all the time. I've been beat up as a child, yes, I have. But certain, being beat up as a child, those traumas will come out later at a certain age. You don't have to be, it doesn't have to come out at that age. You can be 55 when it comes out, right? So these are also, like Kanishka said, according to neuroscience, certain traumas that happen when you're a child, this will go on later in life. It is going to come out sometime with even a small insecurity that you're going through. So it is really important to try as much as possible to not use physical methods of disciplining children. There are so many other methods that you can use, and they're easily available online. And of course, lots of organizations like World Vision, even Child Protection Force, we do a lot of workshops for parents on positive parenting, on minimum usage of physical disciplining. So yeah, so this is something that I don't believe in personally, but
no, I have to agree. I guess when we were growing up, the exposure that we had as children to the modern day child and the exposure that he or she has is very difficult, and their depth of understanding is extremely different. As such, the method, the approach, I guess, to discipline should also change with the times. What worked 20, 30 years ago may not necessarily be the right answer in today's context. Kanishka, any thoughts in terms of that? And I have something specifically to ask of you in a little bit. So just let me ask you first to add to Milani's thoughts on how do we discipline children at home.
Okay, with the limited time frame, so I will tell a wonderful quote to you. So that is made by Dorothy Lowe, right? So if children live with hostility, so they learn to fight, and at the same time, if children live with praise, they learn to appreciate. So what is our observation in the society? So basically, how many of us approving violence at the same time? So that is only the only the quote. I mean, now for an example, in the social learning and modeling, so theoretically we say that in psychology, so people learn what they live. That for an example, children learn what they live, as Milani very correctly said. So children see the role of their parents, the behavior, the practice of their parents. For an example, if my father has been beaten me, so definitely the same practice will be practiced by myself as well as a father. So that is now for an example. On the other hand, so if a child hits or beats to an adult, so in the society, how we define that? So that is called cruelty or hostility. But if an adult hits a child, so that is called discipline. Something has been mistaken. I mean, now if an adult hits a child, so that is okay. But if a child hits an adult, so that is wrong. So what is your opinion? So for an example,
right? Interesting quote and an interesting perspective, but I didn't expect Kanishka's comments to go that deep. But hold that thought, Kanishka, and I think the quote that you brought out is very apt. It is something that requires everyone to sort of spend some time and really think about it. But on that note, can I ask you, I know World Vision does quite a lot of psychosocial work or support work. Could you expand on that a little bit before we dive into the next question that's coming from the audience?
Right. So basically, so psychosocial, the term that we are using as psychosocial, so we have to first understand what is the real meaning of that. So basically, that is an interaction of three fundamental phenomena. So the first thing is human cognition and human behavior, and also the social aspect. So we have to deal with the cognition or the thinking patterns of people. That means basically the attitude. And also at the same time, we have to deal with the human behavior. That means the practice. And also with the society. That means maybe with his immediate family or maybe with the entire society. So including those three aspects only as an organization or as an activist, so we have to work in. So in that case, what World Vision do is basically nowadays with the COVID-19 situation under the child protection sector. So basically we are very much keen on providing psychosocial support for the vulnerable families as well as children. So in terms of that, so initially we are working collaboratively with the National Child Protection Authority to develop a psychosocial mechanism in every of divisions. So for an example, so all the people must know about the services that provided by the government under the divisional secretariat office. So under that, so we know that child protection officer, psychosocial officer is there. So by the help of that particular officer, so nowadays we are providing the trainings, technical trainings to the particular duty bearers to get their maximum support towards establishing the psychosocial support service. For an example, if a child now as a country, now we are trying to start reopen the schools again. So in that case, what kind of measurements that our authorities have been taken in terms of mental health? For an example, to deal with the mental health of teachers, to deal with the mental health or the depression or the anxiety of the children. So what kind of measurements that our education authorities as well as child protection authorities have been taken? So we have to be very much keenful on that. So then only we can get normal our routine back. So in terms of that, so World Vision Lanka is very keen about psychosocial support services in terms of providing support directly to the vulnerable communities as well as supporting to the relevant duty bearers.
So I mean, thank you, Kanishka. For me, I guess that is the role of World Vision, and I understand the angle that World Vision is taking. But going back to what you mentioned earlier on, and also elaborating on what Milani spoke about, owing to various difficulties and challenges, now that you've got parental pressure, you've got children are distressed, they are frustrated, they take it out on the parents, basically their frustrations. Parents then try to react, and that's what it is at the end of the day, reaction. Now, this is on one side, and I agree with Milani reiterate what Milani said, that, there must be a better way to discipline children rather than taking the rod. But here is the reality. There are many parents who also find it easy, because of the pressures that they're in, to let the children be. So if you go back to what Kanishka said earlier on, give them the mobile phone and just let them be to a side, because they're not going to come pestering you. Now, you keep doing that a few times, it becomes a habit. Now you revoke that privilege, you're creating anxiety and distress, right? Now you have that as a situation as well, where you've actually created the undisciplined, without a proper routine. Under these circumstances, when you have a situation as such as what we have now, Milani, how does a parent diffuse the stress, the issues that come up as a result of this?
It's all balanced, Anton. I believe it's balanced, because I have a client, a 13-year-old boy, whose tab I confiscated. So I am the lawyer. I confiscated his tab very proudly. Looking at history, I will tell you this. He entire history was on raping my cousin, boy raping cousin, boy having sex with sister, boy raping sister, right? So this child was subject to, he lived in a family of domestic violence. His father used to rape his mother in front of him since he was very small. And when he grew, his father used to teach him, you're not a boy, you don't know anything unless you know how to rape a woman. You go out with your cousin all the time, this is how you rape her, right? So this was taught to him, and it's what he keeps looking for in his tab, okay? So I confiscated his tab, because he wasn't studying and his grades were really low. So I said, okay, you can get your tab back if you show me results. And we kind of had these sessions for him where he comes and sits with one of our teammates and does his schoolwork. And if he does good, he gets his tab. So I believe it's all balanced, right? So from like I said, routine time, from studies to sleeping time, to have a routine, basically. I mean, it is something that each one of us needs. All of us need a routine in life, right? Otherwise, you're not going to go anywhere. I'm very particular on time discipline, where you have to be on time.
Sure.
If you say,
sure.
These things. So, my teammates know how angry I get when people are not on time. But these are the things that you need to instill in the children. So even if it is the tab, using the tab for schoolwork or using a device for schoolwork, and maybe also for pleasure sometimes, but also where parents actually consciously make an effort to spend time with your children, because we are so addicted to this device. All of us are, I think, unless we make a conscious decision to stay away from it. Social media is so addictive. You just want to sit there, just keep scrolling. So I think it's something that all adults need to make a conscious effort. Okay, now it's time for me to spend time with my child. So either go for a walk or, engage the children in other things other than the device. Okay. For example, games, remote control cars, puzzles. These are things that children have forgotten, I think. But they're extremely interesting when they start doing it. We started playing cards recently after such a long time. And it's so interesting. It's so much fun to do it with the family. So it is all that balance. Yes, you do have your screen time, which is fine. Sometimes on a Sunday, I let the kids watch what they watch because I want to have an afternoon nap. It is also about our convenience also as parents. We need to rest because that also is important for your emotional intelligence. So it is okay that kids, but as long as it's regulated, so you create that balance at home instead of letting the child. Yeah.
No, I think you're right there. And I'm going to sort of maybe twist that a little bit. But before that, I've got a comment from one of our audience, and that's shocking too. It says, beating children up has become such a normal, accepted method in schools, which even parents accept, even in girls' schools. I mean, To me, honestly, it doesn't matter whether it's a girls' school or a boys' school, but children are children at the end of the day. But that comment, it is true, because I have heard parents tell the teachers, don't worry, you beat him, yeah, it's okay. You have my blessings. And on that note, can I also add to that, caregivers. Now, lots of parents leave their children with caregivers. Whether it's the babysitting place, whether it's the nursery, whether it's the neighbor's place, because parents are working. Now, again, these individuals are given the green light to beat children up. How do we deal with that? Because in most cases, children never come back and talk about it, do they?
Communication. I believe Kanishka will be answering that. I mean, again, it's communication. That communication you build up with your child since the child is really small, where there are no secrets, there is nothing. They will come and tell you everything. And the way you as a parent would build that conversation up so that the child will state if something is going on. Of course, I mean, there are parents who have no choice. They have to leave their children with caregivers. But if something is wrong, if for the parent to be able to identify it at the beginning. Kanishka?
Kanishka, I mean, can I throw something in there for you to just answer together, I suppose? I mean, all of that is said, it's well and said nice, right? I mean, if you, right from the young age, have that relationship, if you build that relationship, if you create that environment, that engaging environment, that open communication, it's fantastic. But as we all know, life in today's context, I mean, that is a dream, because in most cases, it's a bit too late to create that, or parents feel that they don't have the time to invest to create that, because children are grown. They're in their 10-year-old child, 11-year-old child is already advanced. At this point, at this juncture, what advice can you give parents in terms of how do they handle that? How do they create that relationship with the children so that they can mitigate the kind of abuse that they might end up with at school or at caregivers or etc.? Kanishka, you want to pick that up first? And then I will ask.
Basically, I believe that when it comes to the root causes of approving corporal punishment or approving some kind of violent disciplining methods, so fundamentally there are two things. The first thing, I believe that the childhood experience. Now, for an example, as I mentioned earlier also, as a father, what kind of childhood experience or what kind of parenting strategies used by my parents on me? So that is the first thing. That means my childhood experience. The second thing is ignorance, as Milani very correctly said. So education. Basically, if for an example, earlier I told that children learn what they live. So if I have seen only the corporal punishment in my childhood, both in household and also in the school, so the same practice I will be doing during my parenting also. So that is the first thing. The other thing is ignorance. So for an example, earlier we got punishment from school. What were the mistakes we have done? So for an example, we have gone at the left side of the corridor. On the other hand, we had a chewing gum. On the other hand, we cut some of our lessons. So, but nowadays, what kind of mistakes, what kind of wrong things that students are doing in school? So we all know that top secrets, right? 12 years, 13 years, early pregnancy, right? So on the other hand, substance abuse, drug abuse. So those are the things that students are involved in right now. So, but now the issue has been updated. But what has happened to our science in terms of disciplining? So the same method, which is brought from the colonial stages. So the same method still we are using, the rod, corporal punishment, or scolding, yelling at. So those are the methods that we are using. So we have to think, the first thing is we have to realize that I am wounded. So very correctly, the World Health Organization and Center for Disease Control and Prevention, so very correctly they are mentioning 10 adverse childhood experiences. So for an example, all the abuses are there. If I am abused, if I am beaten, so then my results also the same. So we have to be aware about that first. So then only we can heal I can heal my wound. So that is the first thing. The second thing is I need to educate myself. So what kind of measurements that other countries or other developed nations are practicing in terms of discipline, for an example. So instead of punishments, what kind of consequences that I can give to my child in terms of discipline instead of using the cane or the rod. So what kind of things that I can brought in. For an example, how many children in our schools that they know about the expected behavior from them as students, as children? How many of they aware about the expected behavior in the household? So do they have a routine? Do they have a schedule? So for an example, now we have very limited time in this case, but how we are, what kind of measurements that we have in terms of offering options for the children? So for an example, still in rural areas, we have the same experience. So still in our rural areas, they know only the doctor, proctor, and engineer. So what kind of career options they have, right, for the children? So those are the fundamentals. So if we explore ourselves, if we expand ourselves, then only we can bring options for the children. So if we have enough options, the children are utilizing, children are occupied then. For an example, how many idling periods we have in the school? So we have to think about the root causes. So still we are looking at the symptoms, the behavior of the children, but we cannot understand the root cause on that for that particular behavior of the children. So
I agree with you on that, Kanishka. And on that note, can I then throw this question to both of you, and maybe Milani, you want to take it first, and Kanishka can add his thoughts to that. Is we now know there is a situation, we now know the stress, and we know that it can cross the line to becoming abuse. And we agree that it needs to be mitigated, it needs to be avoided. What can I ask are the measures that have been put into place? Milani, I know you drive a different initiative across the island, and I know World Vision has their own mandate. Can I ask you both, what are the measures that have been put into place to mitigate the situation? Because we want to look at it from a root cause rather than the symptom. And I agree with Kanishka on that. What are the initiatives taken? What are the guidelines provided to ensure that this is prevented to a greater extent or mitigated, if I may? Milani?
So from my working point of view, Anton, what we do, I do a lot of workshops for children based on emotional intelligence and protective behaviors, body safety, and so on. So we actually started doing this as a pilot in a school, but then we had to stop because of the pandemic. But now slowly we're starting again, and I've done some online workshops for children as well. So I do believe in empowering the child. So the child is aware. So not only empowering the child physically to say that, okay, protect your body this way, but also emotional intelligence to teach the child what emotional well-being is, and how to protect yourself, your body, and your emotions. So even if you're, say, for example, living in an environment of domestic violence, how you can protect yourself, how you can protect your emotions, maybe even the other children at home. So this is one thing. The other thing, we have also been doing quite a lot of workshops with the Sri Lanka Police Department, with the Women and Children Bureau, because they are the first point of contact when a child comes, into the police station with a problem. So we've done quite a lot of workshops with them on how to, so the psychological aspect of a child, and how to deal with a child when a child comes in, and a lot of we actually got quite a good response from the police force, and we also did something special for them, which is building up their emotional intelligence. So doing practices mindfulness, emotional intelligence, empowering them, because the women and child officer in the police department, so every police station, most of the police stations have a women and children's desk, but they are they are the most under resourced, right? Even if they have to go out to do an investigation, they don't have vehicles. If they have to take a child to the JMOs, or take a child somewhere, they don't have vehicles, they don't have resources. Some of them, they don't even have an A4 sheet, to type a letter
Wow.
or do it. So extremely under resourced. So this is something we thought was important to empower these women and children's officers.
Sure.
And they're actually, I mean, most of them are very good. They're very hardworking. We've come across, a lot of them who are extremely hardworking. So that is what we thought we'll do for 2020, is to empower the child and also to empower officers like the women and children's officers, and also like Kanishka said, the village level officers, for example, the DCDOs, and the probation officers, all these officers are under resourced. One thing I believe, Anton, is that a lot of money and effort is spent at the top level, at the policy level, and it's all strained, and just a little bit comes down to the grassroots level officers who do quite a lot of work. And then, of course, they get discouraged when they are under resourced. So this is something that government and international NGOs can actually work on, to empower those officers who are working at the ground level, because they are the ones who are real. So this is something that I believe. I don't know, Kanishka, I'm not in the big sector of, the international level, but from a grassroots level, this is what I see. And so our motto for 2020 was take small baby steps forward, and let's see where we go.
Sure. Kanishka, if you would like to add, I know we are mindful of time. We've got a few minutes left, but if you could add to that, in from a World Vision perspective, maybe in bullets, the kind of measures that World Vision has taken to kind of mitigate this issue.
Yes, I think not only from organizational perspective, but also as parental perspective, also this information will valid for you and for all of us. So fundamentally, when it comes to child protection intervention, so we have to be careful about the four aspects. So the first thing is, as Milani mentioned, the child, the perspective of child. That means rights or assertiveness, and also the responsibilities, which is coming under the human values. So when I am aware about my rights, at the same time I should aware about my responsibilities, civic responsibilities. So fundamentally we have to be capacitate the child to be resilient, at the same time to be assertive. So that is the first thing, the child, the act of child. The second thing is the family. So very correctly, Milani mentioned about domestic violence and the interaction between the family members. So fundamentally, what kind of interpersonal relationship that our family unit has at the moment. So we are working with family, for an example, to celebrate the family, to celebrate the relationship among the wife and husband, at the same time as a whole family, extended family as well. So the third thing is the community. So the local level community, including duty bearers as well as civil partners, civil stakeholders. For an example, the religious leaders, the community-based organizations, preschools, all the platforms are coming together. We have to think about community, and also we have to think about enriching their capacities as well as enriching their values. So the fourth part is systems and structural development. So when it comes to the reporting and referral, so still Sri Lanka is developing those kind of phenomena. So for an example, when it comes to child protection violence, how many of us reporting that to the National Child Helpline via 1929? How many of aware about the particular hotline? So that is one of the things. So fundamentally, as Milani also mentioned, working with duty bearers, at the same time working with community in the grassroots, including children. So those are very vital when it comes to the World Vision mandate.
I mean, that you're right. I don't think a lot of people know that there is a helpline, and there is a question that's coming from the audience, and I would like to bring this up, I guess. Outsider looking in, how can one notice and flag the issues when a child of someone that you know or not know is abused? What can you do to intervene? And I guess, thank you for that question. I guess that is to ask a very pertinent question, because of the fear that the children live within, and because of the story that you mentioned earlier on, Milani, where father abuses the mother takes it out on the child, or the father abuses the mother and the child, but because the mother is scared of the father, will never escalate it. Now, the children obviously end up being at the receiving end, but an onlooker or a neighbor or a friend or a relative, can they flag these? Can they escalate these? Would actions be taken?
Absolutely, they should. This is what all of us as the adult community of the world need to know. You must, if you know of a child being abused, if you even have the slightest notion, there are so many people you can talk to. A, the National Child Protection Authority. B, the Police Women and Children's Bureau, far more responsive. C, the closest police station nearest to you. Okay. Then you have civil society organizations, you have probation officers, civil society organizations, NGOs, World Vision, UNICEF, Voice Foundation, Child Protection Force. I mean, easily every person has a smartphone, right? You just type a name, find out. There are so many organizations that you can call if you're scared to go to the police. So, for example, I mean, I'm just giving it on my perspective because, I mean, if somebody comes and tells me this is happening, I'd escort that person to the police and be with that person so that person is comfortable enough to make that complaint.
Sorry, but Milani, I'm just gonna add something to that, and I think you touched on it, but I want you to stress on it. And this is something that happens, I mean, literally, which is, if a child is abused, or if a girl is abused, generally women don't want to go to the police station because of the way they are handled, because of the way they are treated, or because of the way they are sidelined and embarrassed. So are there authorities, or are there institutions, organizations that can look at this with respect and dignity and try and solve the issue, rather than embarrassing them and making them regret that decision?
Absolutely. Ideally, the Police Women and Children's Bureau head office, the one at Armour Street, Mukhtar Plaza, they are very responsive and very sensitive officers we have met. So most of the time, we do take our clients there. And the other thing that you can do is go with a lawyer, right? Because then the response is different. I mean, this is unfortunate, but this is what it is. When you go with a lawyer, the response is much better. And then the lawyer, of course, knows when your rights are infringed, or if you are being ridiculed, or if you're being humiliated. They know when to speak and when not to speak, and what to do and what not to do. So a lot of organizations have their in-house lawyers. I mean, we are just a team of lawyers ourselves working for children. So we always make it a point that we go with our clients to the police station, because otherwise it's an entirely different can of worms, So these are the pointers that I can actually tell the public to do, and then, have like a collective improvement on this.
I think, Anton, your mic is muted.
Sorry. I think this subject is deep, and I think we can go on for hours and days and still not be able to cover it in its full entirety. But having said that, and in the interest of time, thank you very much for the insight and the knowledge share. Can I ask, and let me start with Milani and then back to Kanishka, what would be a takeaway for parents and children listening in today with regards to this whole scenario that we've covered? We do understand what is inevitable. We do understand the challenges and pressures. We do understand how people need to work, through this to become successful. But the objective is, lots of things have been relaxed now, and there is a new norm, I suppose, for both parents, children, organizations, etc. What's your takeaway for parents and children who are listening in today? Post-pandemic, what can they do? What must they do? And what's the end result that they can expect if they consistently and consciously practice that advice? Milani?
So for parents, it's definitely take a break, take a step back, slow down, please slow down, okay? Reevaluate and just keep taking slow steps forward. If there is a problem, it can be resolved, right? Speak to the appropriate people that you need to speak to, but just slow down and get out of that rat race, because that is causing a lot of anxiety within the children, of course. So just take a break, slow down, reevaluate, and then slowly move forward. Children, of course, just to empower the children. So I think, again, that's on the parents to start empowering the children, so that, they are emotionally okay, because that is first more.
And we lost. Kanishka, would you like to add your thoughts?
Right. If I make
So
it
now
very,
Sorry.
make it very,
Sorry, Milani, complete that. Sorry. We lost you there for a
I'm
quick
done.
second.
Just for the parents to also be aware of empowering the children, and again, try to move into more positive parenting, because we are the ones who also instill those horrible negative seeds in them that they will carry
Correct.
for an entire lifetime. We make a conscious effort to be more positive, to be more sensitive towards their emotions, then I guess they're going to grow up to be better citizens. Kanishka, to you.
right. To be very simple and adding to what Milani also mentioned. So if I brief my all the content into a statement, so that is we have to reflect every time children learn what they live. So that is the only thing that I realized as a psychologist. I mean, uh, in terms of social learning and also modeling, so children learn not by our advice, but what they live. So be a role model, not only for my children, but also for my neighborhood as well. So in that case, please consider, so those are the rich values that we have as a country. Still, I believe that we have a lot of cultural positive things and cultural positive norms as well. So please utilize those positive aspects in our country. So consider the other child also as mine. So on the other hand, I want to add, when it comes to reporting mechanisms, so please empower your child to have at least 5 heroes. For an example, we tell that we teach children, keep your thumb the superhero, then the next, then the next, then the next, and five superheroes to tell your top secrets. To tell your top secrets. For an example, maybe sexual abuse, maybe corporal punishment, maybe bullying. So please tell, keep on telling to your top heroes, 5 heroes. As an adult also, that is beneficial for us as well. So those are the concluding statements that I want to make.
Right. Thank you. We've just about run out of time. Sincere thanks to World Vision, Shireen and team, for putting this together, for giving the audience an opportunity to understand the role of parents and caregivers during the pandemic. And I think between Kanishka Rathnayake, who is their technical advisor for child protection and participation, and of course Milani Salpitikorala, who is the attorney at law and founder and executive director for Child Protection Force, we certainly dived deep to understand and take away the importance, the current circumstances, and a way forward in how to mitigate this. Both Milani and Kanishka, thank you very much for your time. I know, Milani, you've got a long drive back to Colombo. Thank you for taking the time. Kanishka, appreciate the time and the input. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you on this. Just a quick announcement that World Vision has also organized another session a little later in the afternoon that talks about the role of employers and employees during a pandemic. Joining us later this afternoon at 5 p.m. is Suvendrani De Silva, the coordinator for People and Culture, Staff Wellbeing at World Vision Lanka, and Kaushal Mendes, the Human Resources Director at Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, and the Governing Council member SLIDA. And I will join you at 5 p.m. today. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon. Stay productive.